Like to call the June 11th Planning Board meeting to order. Ask everybody to stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest with any of the items on the agenda? All right. Well, then we have a quorum with 5 people. Are there any changes to the agenda tonight? I guess.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I ask that we remove item B, PB 1913, Currituck County text amendment from the agenda.
Okay.
I make a motion that we remove it.
I'll second it.
All right. Motion passes. Agenda is approved. Are there any changes to the May 14th meeting minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes as presented.
Second.
All right. The minutes for the May 14th meeting are approved. We have one item of old business, PB 1907, Currituck County Text Amendment Dune Protection Update.
That's me.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Planning Board members. So at the April Planning Board meeting, staff presented a county-sponsored text amendment to the ordinance intended to strengthen oceanfront dune protection, and that was directed by the Board of Commissioners in response to some fairly recent development on the oceanfront where dunes were being impacted and there was some dune excavation activities. At that Planning Board meeting, several members of the development community voiced concerns about the ordinance and nonconforming issues and other issues, and this board requested that staff take the ordinance back out to the public for some input. And so we did that on May 30th. We had a stakeholder meeting in Corolla at the Wildlife Education Center. We sent out emails targeting stakeholders, letting them know, where the meeting was going to be held. We actually rescheduled the meeting to accommodate the Home Builders Association members. And that meeting was attended by Corolla area property owners, and members of the development community, including real estate agents, contractors, developers, property management companies, homeowner associations, representatives of the Outer Banks Association of Realtors, as well as the Outer Banks Home Builders Association. And Board of Commissioners Chairman Bob White and Commissioner Paul Beaumont were also in attendance. So at that meeting, staff just did a brief overview of the proposed ordinance and then opened the floor for comments and feedback on the ordinance. And I took notes, and the discussion points from that meeting are summarized in the memo that's included in your agenda packet tonight. Some of I think the highlights from that are the general concern about the number of nonconforming pools that may be created as a result of the proposed text amendment. There was, I think, consensus among the meeting attendees as well as staff and the Board of Commissioners members present to strike the portion of the ordinance that reads that prohibits dune disturbance on a frontal or primary dune, extending that not only the 60 feet but the dune itself landward. I think everybody was in agreement that that's probably something that could be removed from the proposed ordinance. Another suggestion was to evaluate, which Willow actually, I believe, asked for at the Planning Board meeting in April. Willow Kelly from the Outer Banks Association of Realtors asked for us to evaluate other setback options like a 10-foot, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 foot. And, again, concern about insurance implications on nonconforming pools, I thought a good comment from that meeting was to consider a grandfather clause for existing pools and structures for maintenance and replacement. And then, evaluating where are the existing pools within the 60-foot area and what are the impacts to the dunes on those properties. And the meeting attendees did request that another meeting be held prior to language being heard by this board and the Board of Commissioners. In response to that meeting, the Board of Commissioners scheduled a work session prior to their meeting on June 17th to talk about the dune protection ordinance and these comments and discussion points from the meeting. And staff is working on doing some data gathering using GIS to bring some of those discussion points, the data for some of those discussion points, like evaluating other setback options and just the total number of pools that may be impacted by the ordinance. At the April meeting, I had data about one particular subdivision, but not the whole county, so we're working through that with our GIS coordinator, or what's it really? Coordinator?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Our GIS expert of the county. And so we'll get direction. We anticipate getting direction from the Board of Commissioners on June 17th, and then we'll update this board on what that is and work to bring, revised language back to this board for action in the future.
All right, thank you. We have one item of new business. PB 1912, Currituck County height limit request and amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 3, Zoning Districts, Section 359, to increase the maximum building heights from 35 feet to 65 feet in the heavy industrial zoning district. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, this is a request by Currituck County to amend the Unified Development Ordinance that would allow for the structure height to go above 35 feet, and that request is to increase it to 65 feet. The purpose of this request is to provide some design flexibility for the building and accommodate some more intense land uses, as well as providing areas, possibly enclosed areas on a roof for roof-mounted equipment or any other type of appurtenance that could be placed on top of the roof for needing additional height. A couple of things I wanted to provide to you in terms of structure height is show you how we measure it and the definition of structure height. So where we measure from is the finished grade, and that would be the average established finished grade of a structure, and to the highest point of the roof surface of a flat roof. That will be here. The mean roof height of an A-frame. The mean roof height is the midpoint of the highest roof surface from the edge of the eave to the top of the roof. And the deck line of a mansard roof, which would be here. The UDO limits the maximum structure height to 35 feet in all zoning districts, and that's been the standard for many years. It also provides for some sustainability options that you can increase the structure height should you choose to do these incentives. They include such things as energy conservation practices, some LED or LEED certification, water conservation practices, and quality protection, as well as siting the building on the property for direction of the sun. If you do those, you can achieve some additional roof height, but it will not bring you to the 65 feet that's being requested in this application. Also in this application, in the memo, you have some comparisons of other jurisdictions. What we've pulled are some communities nearby as well as some communities who have industrial parks established in their area. Camden County recently adopted their Unified Development Ordinance, and in their heavy industrial district, they have a maximum height of 50 feet. Pasquotank has a range of 56 feet to 400 feet. The reason for the 400 feet has to do with the airship hangars that they have in there. It's specific for that particular area. So it's more in line with 56 feet. Dare County has a range of 35 to 40 feet, depending on the use type, and that's the county itself. Perquimans has a range of 35 to 50 feet, depending on an adjacent land use. Isle of Wight has an industrial park. Theirs is 100 feet with an increased setback of 1-to-1 above 35 feet. Pittsboro has a recently established mega site in their community and in the manufacturing, which is compatible with the industrial zoning districts for the county. Theirs is at 50 feet. Onslow County recently approved their industrial area, and theirs is 85 feet, but they require additional fire protection for that. As I mentioned during the work session, what structure height generally does is establishes a sense of scale to a building, to a neighborhood, to a community, relationship to the road, to other structures. So, what we have in the county are all 35-foot mean roof height structures. So structures are going to be in the neighborhood achieving maybe a 40, possibly 45 feet with that mean roof height measurement. Structures that would go up to 65 feet are almost doubling in height. So what you may want to consider is the scale of that as it relates to adjacent uses or property lines. When we talk about our current ordinance, we also have some compatibility standards that are found in there, and that deals with certain land uses when you're adjacent to an existing single-family dwelling. You have to provide for, and on the image to your right, that step-back approach from the lot line, where if you have a dwelling adjacent to a business or an industrial use, you step that height up as you get further away from the house. So you're achieving that maximum height further away. If we employ some type of setback, that would take that into a consideration where it relates to businesses or other land uses other than single-family dwellings. In your memo, you also have text amendment review standards, and these, when you're looking at making a recommendation, and ultimately when the Board of Commissioners makes their decision, you're using these standards to weigh the relevance as to whether or not this particular text amendment should be approved or denied. And in staff's evaluation of those review standards, we are providing you with a recommendation. But before we go through that, I did want to talk briefly about the land use plan. And that happens to be one of the review factors that we look at. The land use plan doesn't really specifically have any type of policy or direction as it relates to structure height. But what it does do is it speaks to compatibility, and that is compatibility between land uses. So compatibility between structure heights has an indirect relationship to that. There's no policy to address it, but there are 10 land use development goals that are found in the front of the document, and we've pulled out some of those goals that we feel are close to that compatibility. Goal 5 has to do with compatible businesses so that we can diversify our tax base and our economic base. And Goal 10, which seems to be more relevant, and that's to properly distribute development forms and infrastructure so you have compatibility with surrounding land uses. So there's also the Appendix H in the 2006 Land Use Plan, and really all that does is it deals with build-out of particular communities, and it uses the 35 feet as a reference point. I included it in there only because it referenced 35 feet. It really has no direct relationship to a goal objective of the land use plan. We've already spoke about the compatibility and the setback for single-family dwellings as it relates to the land use plan, which is also one of those review standards. So getting into staff's recommendation, we are recommending approval of this amendment. We'd like to see the incorporation of the one-to-one setback above 35 foot in height and make sure that adequate fire protection is achieved, as well as community compatibility standards are maintained, and the statement of reasonableness and consistency is adopted. And I'm providing you that in your memo. The board may choose to add to, take away from, anything that you feel might fit those review standards that are found in the land use plan, but we've given you something to work with when you're looking at making your recommendation. The text amendment language that you have before you deals with the heavy industrial district only. It changes the height in the table from 35 to 65 feet. The language does not have the one-to-one setback, but we are asking that you consider that as part of your recommendation.
You would like to add that to the language?
That's our recommendation. That's not something that was
Right.
presented as part of the application. But we feel that will address that scale and compatibility with adjacent land
So
uses.
you need that included in the motion.
Yes.
Okay.
If the board so chooses to
Okay.
include that in your recommendation. That's planning board's recommendation. That's staff recommendation. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, does anyone have any questions for?
I just have a
Ms.
general
Oliver?
question. How many heavy industrial areas does the county have?
So there's the Wind Chaser development in Moyoc, which is where the concrete manufacturing facility
Where
and
that little
East
run
Coast
right there,
Abatement's
okay.
located. And these are ones that I'm talking about that actually have development on them.
Okay.
There's the junkyard that's in front of that, or the recycling facility
Right.
that's in front of that. There are a couple other heavy industrial zoning districts that are north of that property, but really don't have anything on them. There's a mining site all the way at the state line. As you're coming down, you pick up the one at Maple. Maple's the largest area in that area. There are a couple in the southern part of the county.
Right.
A couple of industrial parks in the southern part of the county.
Okay.
I don't know if fire flow might actually come into play in those areas, because in order to achieve these heights, it's going to require a sprinkler system.
Okay.
Are there any buildings currently right now at 60 feet?
None.
Oh.
Anyone else? All right, well, I don't see anybody here to speak on it, so we'll skip that part. Any other questions or discussion? All right, well, hearing none, I'll open the floor for a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
To approve with the 35-foot step?
Yeah, and the setback, the one-to-one after 35.
So you're motioning to approve what
The
staff
staff
has
recommended.
written?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be one for every 1 foot above 35 feet.
So I'm going to read it back and we'll get it straight. Your motion, Mr. Dahl is motioning to approve the Currituck height limit request as written, and then to include a 1-to-1 setback above 35 feet, providing adequate fire protection can be achieved, community compatibility standards are maintained, and the following suggested statements of consistency are reasonable as recommended by staff. It is consistent with the 2006 land use plan and in the reasonable public interest. Does that work for you?
Yes.
We have a motion.
A second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, that's all we have for tonight, unless anyone has any announcements they would like to make.
So we will be, I'll make a real quick one.
Sure.
As I mentioned during the work session, Currituck Station language will be coming to you very soon, as well as a pattern book to go along with that language. Would the board want to see those together, or do you want to start digesting some of the language through discussions in a work session?
You mean, would we just want to see them fresh at the meeting or have a work session?
Do you want to see them together? And what the pattern book's going to do is it's going to illustrate building design, road design, pedestrian circulations, pedestrian elements. The code's going to be words.
Can they be brought together, or?
They can be brought together, but that's going to be, we probably will bring that to you. If we bring them together, it will probably be August, would be my guess.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Do we want to break it down and have some of it in July, some of it in August, or all of it in August?
Right. It's going to be pretty much
Get a lot of
together.
questions without the illustration.
You mentioned something about a work session. Would that do a work session in July and then have it all in August?
We could discuss that if you want to do that. We will propose some changes for all development as part of this Currituck Station amendment as well.
A small portion will be
Small
countywide.
portion will be countywide. Parking, some parking standards, some bike parking, which we don't have a lot of, will be countywide. And it's just to clean up some language, but it will apply countywide.
I would think the work session sometime in July and then have it all in August would be a good idea.
Okay.
Is that okay with everyone?
That's good.
Yeah.
Any specific time for a work session that's okay with everybody?
It might be August, so depending on when that meeting date changes for July, if there is a meeting date change, because you mentioned that, did you say July might,
I got you.
we might need to change
We
that
could
date?
come in early maybe for the July meeting. Is that a possibility for everybody?
What about
No.
third?
Some of us have a
Yeah.
job.
What do you?
What we can do is email the planning board and let you know where we're at
Okay.
That
with Currituck Station, and if it makes sense to schedule a work session in July, or if we'll move that to August.
We can
It
do
might actually depend on the amount of information that we have going to you in July, too. If you have a good deal of applications, we may consider that for a different time,
Okay.
or bring you in at a different day, on a different day, to just start going over some of this language.
I think just whenever you get ready, let us
Okay.
know, and we'll try to pick a day that
Okay.
everybody's available.
Sounds good.
All right?
I think that's good.
All right. Any other announcements? All right. Well, that's all we have, and I'll open the floor for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. We are adjourned.